Greetings all, Shane Bruce, Resto Mod Daisy, wishing the viewership a Merry Christmas. And we've got a video today to address some of the commentary that's been rolling in here at the Resto Mod Daisy channel. One question I keep getting is, what kind of tools do you need to work on daisies? Well, not many. You will find that you can utilize screwdrivers, both a standard slot tip screwdriver or a Phillips screwdriver. These two screwdrivers will handle every daisy ever made from the beginning of the run to current day. Now, you'll see predominantly Phillips screwdrivers and guns produced after about, I think, 1967. Prior to that, on the older guns, you'll always see slotted tip screws. Now let's travel over here and we'll see an example of slotted tip screws. It's also not unusual on these older daisies, if they haven't been messed with, to find a little washer underneath the screw. They stuck those on there in days of yore, but they don't do it these days. So you need a screwdriver that can handle a slot tip or a screwdriver that can handle a Phillips head. So if you've got those two screwdrivers, you can work on all known daisy products. What's the next thing you're gonna need? Gonna need a nut driver. Now, in Daisyland, you're supposed to find small nuts on the other side of the bolts that hold the gun together. You'll notice there's one for the lever, one back here on the stock screw, and on a Red Ryder, there would be a corresponding nut. Oh, wait a minute. This is a very typical Red Ryder. It's lost its nuts. They're not there. Well, anyway, if you had a device that had a nut, you need a way to stabilize that, because especially in the older guns, they can be a bit sticky. So this is actually an important piece of gear to have. And the magic size for the nut driver is, as you see, an 8mm will do the job. And then, of course, it's regular decimal, equivalent. But that'll get the nuts off when they're stuck. You'll also occasionally need a pair of pliers. And the reason for the pair of pliers is because daisies have spring blocks. These little pieces of steel actually hold the mainspring in place and allow the gun to fire. And when you get to the process of removing the plunger assembly, you're going to need to pull that out of the way. Sometimes they drop out, sometimes they don't. And on those occasions when they don't drop out, and that one looks like it's going to fight with me, it's time to pull them out. And that's what you'll need a pair of pliers for. So, a pair of pliers, two screwdrivers, and a nut driver will get everything inside your daisy taken down and taken apart. There's a couple other things you also need to have, depending on what you're planning to do to your daisy. When you finally get the power plant out, you may want to replace a spring, or you may want to replace a compression cup, or you may need to install a new abutment washer. And there are tools to help you do each one of these jobs. Let's deal with the abutment washer first. The abutment washer actually stays in the gun, right about up in here. It sits in the top of the compression chamber, and it's retained there by a detent, a small divot in the barrel assembly that puts pressure on the abutment washer and holds it in place. Without this washer, you're not going to get any compression in the chamber. It's an important piece. To seat the washer, you have to come in through the back of the gun, and you'll need to use something that's roughly the same diameter of the washer to push it into place and tap it down, and hopefully it stays put like it ought to. So it slides in from the back, goes up to this step, and you tap it in place and pray to the gods that it stays put. So that's a tool you'll need, roughly a 1/2-inch pipe. PEX pipe works, copper pipe works, 1/2-inch wooden dowel works, it all works. So you get the abutment washer in, now your gun is sealed, so that when the firing stroke occurs, the air tube comes back, the spring pushes that column of air into the air tube and the gun shoots. So without the abutment washer, nothing really good is going to happen. Occasionally you'll need to be able to work on these plunger assemblies, and some of them are fairly simple to take apart, but can be real problems to put together. So to solve that issue, you probably want to make yourself one of these. You're actually not going to make yourself anything. You're going to go down to Home Depot and pay a couple of bucks for a caulk gun. What you will have to make is one of these. That's a fender washer with a 1/2-inch diameter hole that has a slash cut in it. As you can see, it's been sectioned. And it's been sectioned so it will fit the plunger assembly. And when you've got it fitted into the plunger assembly, then what you can do with your caulk gun is get it in the gun, like so. It's always smart to have that washer on top. Put a little pressure on it, make sure it stays put. work your plunger assembly so it's upright, like so, and then ratchet it on down. Normally it's smarter to do this with the whole thing in a vise, but for demonstration purposes, you can see that we're taking spring tension off the unit. And now we can easily dismount, dismount the compression cup, the washer, the air tube, and the felt wiper. Do whatever we're going to do to that, and then go ahead and reinstall it. And we don't have to worry about fighting spring pressure while we're doing it. So this is actually a worthwhile couple of bucks to spend, if you're going to spend any time at all taking daisies apart and putting them together. If you're not, well then, hey, you can do it by hand, and hopefully you won't put your eye out. All right, so now that you've got your work done to the plunger assembly and you want to get it reinstalled, it's always good to have a little piece of wood that you can fit into the back of the plunger assembly when you go to reinstall it. Because as soon as your new compression cup gets up to about this point on the gun, you're going to notice that it's trying to bite. It doesn't want to just slide in. So you're more than likely going to have to install a wooden dowel so you can get bearing on it. Give it a couple of love taps with a small hammer to get it pushed in and on its way. Then you can use the wooden dowel to go ahead and fully seat it. And you've got your install done. Now, if you're like me and you're constantly pulling plunger assemblies in and out of guns, you're going to want to get a piece of really thin spring wire, something that fit down the air tube, so that you don't have to pull the abutment washer every time you want to install a new bit, a compression cup or new spring or whatever. So you take your piece of wire, you slide it down the air tube, and this allows you to visually sight down the interior of the bore to get lined up with that abutment washer hole, which you'll notice is not very large. Then you can slide that through, and then when you hit your tap space, then your air tube is already centered on the abutment washer, and you won't tear it up or beat it up any. So those are essential tools for doing this kind of work. And if you just get your hands on those little bitty tools, not many of them, not very expensive, then you can start tearing up daisies left and right like I do. Well, kids, that's all for tonight. This is Shane Bruce with Rest of My Daisy, signing off.